On this episode, we have my Goomba Italian brother from New York, Tony Morra. Now, Tony and I met in Nashville, where he has an amazing home studio for tracking his drums and producing projects. Since the early 2000s, he has been one of the pioneers of this, which is commonplace now. And with credits like the greats from Phil Ramone to Diane Warren, Donna Summer, Roberta, Flack, Bruce Springsteen, and many more, to current pop stars such as Katy Perry, Selena Gomez, Taylor Swift, Carrie, Underwood, and many more, including all of his CCM, that is contemporary Christian artists like Amy Grant, Avalon, Twyla Paris, Kathy Troccoli, and so on. Tony has done it all, but the secret to his success lies in the studio chops that he acquired over the years, having his own amazing home studio. Check it out right here on the Career Musician Podcast. I'm gonna get that. Okay, you were listening to... We're recording now. What were you saying? You were listening to what?
Okay, I was taking the girl to college, and my wife and her fell asleep, and I'm like, oh, I was just going through what I was going to listen to, and I was like, oh, Michael Rapole, we're gonna talk to him next week, man. Threw on Discovery Anew, and it was like a whole flood of memories of good times, man. Right. That was good times, man. That was good stuff. Good times in Nashville. Rice and beans at Dark Horse. Remember that?
I'm so glad you remember that. All right. First of all, Tony Morra, welcome to the Career Musician Podcast, my brother.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Or as we say, Anthony J. Morra. I really like your full name like that. That's very prestigious.
You know what's kind of strange? What's happening with my name is, one, when people look it up on YouTube, it comes up Anthony Morra drummer, not Tony Morra sometimes. Yeah. And then because I've done so much stuff at my house, that people have met my kids and my wife. You know, they're here because, especially with the COVID thing, and Lori calls me Anthony. You know what I mean? So everybody would be like, oh, you go by Anthony? I'm like, well, no, it's Tony. It's, and so they're like, so slowly but surely, like, like all the old guys, Dave Cleveland, Matt Pearson, they all call me Anthony now. It's like it's transitioned into this weird. So I'm like, okay, whatever. Just Anthony or Tony works on the check. Either one, man.
Okay. I like that. I love it. And that's so funny, man, because my name is the opposite. You were one of the only ones that used to call me Michael. Everybody else called me Mike, and they would always butcher my last name, Ripple, RuPaul.
Oh, yeah, of course. Ripley, down here in the South.
Yeah, and well, and not only that, but everywhere, but it used to really rub me when it was on album credits back in the day when we used to have album credits.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
So then I started going by Nomad, and there's a story behind it. My father's from Cuba. I've had over 25 physical addresses, Right. We're modern day nomads as musicians,
Right. No, it's
and
great.
then it's more memorable. So anyway, I love the stories of our names. I love that.
Yeah.
But don't be surprised, because I actually like Anthony too. That's a good sounding name.
I know a lot of people think they actually do like it. It's like, okay, that's fine. I answer to both, man.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's like whatever you want to call me, man.
All right. So I got to set the stage. So what Tony was talking about when he first mentioned it, this album, Discovery Anew. So Kirk Whalen produced it for me, and Tony was playing drums in the studio. We had an all-star cast, quote unquote, of Nashville cats, like the cats, and most of all, we were all buddies and friends.
Yeah, it was just we were friends. It was just, the work was not that the music was secondary, but what made it fresh and cool is that we were friends and we just were having a fun time. We weren't working.
Yes.
It was just grooving. So it was cool.
Our dear beloved friend Chris Kent on bass, God rest his soul.
Yeah,
we miss you, Chris. I always think about him.
Oh, me too. He was my first friend when I came to Nashville.
Wow, look at that.
First guy that, I know other people when I got here that I met over the phone and networked with, but he was the first guy who I didn't know who he was, and just it was during GMA. It was in a small club. I was actually sitting next to him while he was playing. And the next day we went out for Indian food. So he was like my first friend in Nashville. So he was a special cat, man.
The sweetest spirit. He used to play this green Yamaha bass.
Yeah.
The nicest guy in the world. So nice, but such a ridiculously talented musician. Oh my gosh, and so underrated in a lot of ways,
Oh my gosh, so underrated. It's like during COVID, you know, what did we do? We watched a lot of TV. So I was just watching concerts, and I came across, I don't know if it was on YouTube or Quello or one of those things. It was Larry Carlton and Steve Lukather and Chris Kent. I was like, oh my God, he was unbelievable. And he was like, man, he was just a cat, man.
He was the cat. So then we were holed up over at Dark Horse Recording Studios in Franklin, Tennessee. Yeah, it's a famous studio. And I love how you brought that up because my father, being Cuban, love you, Pop, miss you. He taught me how to cook Cuban food. I think it was like the last day or something that we were there. I cooked.
We were listening to the mixes. That's what it was. We came to listen to the mixes. Yeah. That was great, man.
Oh man, so much fun. So
and Dark Horse was like, you know, to set the scene. You're in Nashville. You're actually in Franklin, and it's on a farm. So you're looking out these windows, and it's horses, and it was such a great hang. There was such a good vibe there at that place too, man.
Absolutely. Stuff, so I want to hear all about you on this episode. And one of the things that really I've always loved about you, okay? Because, so real quick, the Career Musician, we're rolling out a new initiative about how to record from home and sound like a pro. Right? Okay. How to do it the right way.
There you go.
So if you go to our website, thecareermusician.com, you can download a little PDF that kind of gives you like a little, you know, entry level, you know, information on how to get into it. Then you sign up for it, and we have a whole course that we're coming out.
Oh, cool.
Right?
That's good. Yeah. That's great. That's brilliant. And it's important because now it's like you have to. If you want to be a recording musician, especially drummer, you got to do it yourself. You know, the days of being out, we were talking about this before we got on recording on the podcast here, you know, the days of, you know, 10 2s and 6s, which that was the session times, they're still around sort of, but not like they used to be, where you would start at 10, go for lunch, come back at 2, do 3 hours, and then it's not that anymore. You know, you might find some of those here and there, but a lot of it is, like, at least for me, it's just files, checking my WeTransfers in the morning, and you know, and that's how people, and you know, the newer generation, that's how they're learning how to do stuff. That's
right.
You know, from writing the piano part in their bedroom and sending it off to their friend who's playing it in his trailer that he's living in, you know,
anywhere around the world.
So there's a part of it when you're an older guy like me that you're like, oh man, but there's another part of it that's like, wow, it opens up doors to play with so many people, you know. And the thing about it is, it's become ridiculously competitive, you know, and because there's just so many more people doing it. And what's going to separate anybody, I don't care what instrument you're playing, but it's like Michael said, making it sound pro, making it sound like, you know, if, you know, because sometimes people are taking the tracks that, you know, I might play drums on, and I'll send it to a bass player, and then Michael will play guitar on it. And then the producer's taking it into a huge studio and recording an orchestra. So the tracks can't sound like crap.
That's right.
You know what I mean? They got to sound like the real deal.
That's
that's the thing that's going to, and I think that's the thing that's kind of separated me a little bit, in that the product that I send out is, you know, easy to mix. If a mix guy's not happy, you know, then nobody's happy. You know,
well, let me just say, that's the thing that stood out to me. I moved from Nashville to LA in 2005.
Wow,
before I moved, I know, it's crazy. Before I moved in early, I'm going to say you and I met in the early 2000s. So from anywhere from 1999 to 2005 is where you and I met, and we built this very close friendship, and we worked together a ton.
Yeah.
So do you remember the year that I was so impressed with your garage studio. What year was that you started? You started right at the cusp.
I started, well, the room that I'm in now it was a utility room. Connected to the garage. And this was actually the drum room. It was this little tiny room.
I remember that.
That was in 2000. That was in like 2001, 2000, right?
There you go, bro.
And so, but it, of course, it grew from this room to the garage. Then I redid the garage, and it just became its own monster in a way, in that it was so successful so quickly. Now, the thing is, I also had a little jump, which it was like, there was some good and the bad with this. I did a record for this. He's like the Catholic Michael W. Smith, like how Michael W. Smith is the big name guy in Christian music. Tom Booth is like the big guy in Catholic music, you know, and there's not a big market of that, but he's that, it's pop rock, Tom Petty type stuff. So I got hired to play on 6 songs for this guy, Tom Booth, who lives in Arizona. And the other 6 songs were being played with Steve Ferroni was playing on them.
Oh, yeah.
Petty's drummer. Now, I know Steve from New York days. So he was like a big mentor of mine. So it was very cool that we were playing on this record together. So they did his tracks in Arizona at some huge studio, and I did my tracks here with this guy, Jeff Thomas, who was helping him produce the tracks. So I do the songs, we cut them, then he sends them off to Arizona. They do all their whatever tracking they were going to do. And then like maybe 3 or 4 months later, I get a phone call from this guy, Kevin. And he's like, hey, Tony, this is Kevin Becca. And it was odd because I knew the name. I was like, where do I know that name from? But I wasn't putting it together with how I knew it. Turns out Kevin was the editor for Mix magazine. So I was used to seeing his name on print. I wasn't used to hearing him talking to me, you know. So it took me a minute. So he's like, "Oh, I'm mixing the record for Tom Booth, and you know, I just want to ask you a little bit of what's going on in your room." And I'm thinking, "Oh crap, man, he's going to be telling me like, yeah, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, you're doing this wrong." I was waiting for the laundry list, you know. And so he just started asking me about signal chain, what gear I was using and all that. And then at one point I just said, Kevin, let's get to the point here.
Cut to the chase, yeah.
Cut to the chase. Tell me what this call's about. He goes, well, I recorded Steve Ferroni in a $1 million facility. And he played great. The drums sounded great. And he said, you know, I had the template of all the stuff in there. And then I brought your drums in. You know, I mixed those 6 songs first. Now I'm mixing the songs that you play drums on. He goes, and I'm finding myself turning off stuff. I'm turning off compressors. I'm turning off EQ. And he's like, I got like 2 compressors on your kick and snare and maybe one over the drum bus and a couple things on the rooms. He goes, I'm basically not doing anything to your drums and they sound great. What the hell are you doing? Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. So that, you know, it went from like bad to really good. So
best compliment ever.
Best compliment ever. The mix guy was floored. So I told him all the gear I had. I had a couple engineers come in here and kind of dial in stuff with me. But so the long story short of it is he did a little thing on my room in Mix magazine. Nice. So that was good. That was in 2003 because by 2003 I had the whole place done with the garage and everything redone. So that kicked off a lot of people really interested in, well, what is he doing over there? You know, I'm interested in seeing that. But there was a lot of backlash, like going into a studio and the engineer saying, "Oh, you're the guy who's trying to put studios out of business." And I'm like, "No, I'm not." And I wasn't the only guy doing it. You know,
you're trying to stay in business.
I'm just trying to play on songs. And really, you know, for anybody that's listening, what I had in this little room before it was anything, it was just, like I said, a utility room. It was loud, but I used to just have my drums and my practice kit in here. And I had a little piece of crap Roland mixer. I mean, it was old. Not that Roland makes bad mixers. It was just old. And half the channels didn't work. And I had a couple mics on the kit. And I did have my Rode rack at the time, which back in the old days, we used D88s for backing tracks.
That's right.
And, you know, we didn't have a laptop to edit the tracks. If someone had a new song, you know, I was playing with artists that had hits every week. So they wanted to introduce songs. So I had to edit songs, make them shorter and all that. And I had to do it with tape. So I would practice along with what I was doing to make sure it flowed and felt good. But I had headphones on and, you know, just a bunch of keyboard players that Michael and I know, they would come over just to hang out. They'd be go, oh, well, let me throw the headphones on. I'd be like, I'd pay to get drums on my demos that sounded like that, you know? And that's how it all started. That's what gave me the motivation to do it. Cause it was guys, a lot, especially in the Christian music industry at that time, country people, the country scene was starting to get more pop. And they started, this might be before you got here, I don't remember, but what they started doing is they started hiring the guys, because the Christian musician guys never played on country stuff. But then, like Chris McHugh was the first guy, the drummer.
There you go.
They wanted guys with more pop sense to play the Christian stuff and to do the demos because it was becoming more pop. So a lot of those guys that I knew who were like the CCM musicians, they didn't want to use loops on the stuff. They wanted it to sound live. So that's sort of what started my ball rolling. And so my whole thing was never going to be like, oh, I'm going to replace, the sound kitchen. You can't replace that place. It's this huge studio here in Nashville. Nicole's been there. He's played there a ton.
Beautiful.
It doesn't replace any of that, but it's doable. And being a New Yorker and having a whole career in New York, where I played sessions where the drums were literally in the freaking vocal booth. Like you'd have to take the front rim off, so the bass drum would be right up against the glass. And thank God I wasn't as fat then as I am now. I was thin then, because I never would have fit, man. I used to be like right on top of the drums to play them, and the drums sounded great. So you can make drums sound great in a not huge space. Yeah. So I did have to fight those battles, but then it just sort of took off, and it now has become sort of the norm for everybody.
Well, I love that, and I love the video that I just watched before starting here from the West Barn podcast.
Oh yeah, with Joe West, yeah.
Yeah, you did a great walkthrough of your space. Thank you, first of all, for sharing that. One of the things, again, one of the premises here is that we share our knowledge and experience.
Got to share it, right?
I love that. So that was really cool. You gave the full rundown.
Yeah, Joe was great. I mean, Joe and I have connections going back to Pittsburgh, New York, and a lot of different things. So, he's a good buddy, and he's worked here, and he's a top guy, and he appreciated what I was doing. And I think with the advent, I don't want to come off as like, I know it all, I do it all. I've just done it for a long time. When you do something like, I was talking to a new client the other day, and he's like, man, you've done some cool stuff. And I'm like, when you've been on the planet as long as I have, you're bound to do a thing that's cooler too, It's like, I've just been around a long time. It's not any great genius, and we do have the experience to share it. But like what Joe was, one of part of his thing, just like yourself, is like, what's the difference? Because there are guys who are coming up and they're doing good, they're playing, but then like there's some people, like financially they don't have a big enough budget, so they work with someone who's cheaper, maybe younger, maybe not as experienced, but plays great and delivers. But when they have the budget to step it up, that's when that's always been how it was in session world. It's, when you had the budget, you called the A-list guys when you could. Mm-hmm. And it's just because they have the experience, and because you could get it done quicker. Mm-hmm. And in the long run, you're spending less money than you are when you're trying to nickel and dime. And then, and part of, I think, what folks are trying to learn and trying to teach people is what makes the difference. Mm-hmm. Because when you're playing boom, pop, it's boom, pop. And maybe I play it tighter because I'm older. A younger guy might not play it as tight, but we can fix everything today. But why would you not go with guy number B and you go with guy number A? And for me, it's all about how you send your signal into your interfaces, into your computer. What's going there before it's being recorded? A lot of guys want to get their sound after it's recorded. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I know exactly what you're saying.
And things are getting better where you could use plugins to dial in your sound. And it's all about cost. You want to save cost. You get a couple plugins and you make your drums sound good. But when you do that, especially for drums, it just makes everything thinner and tighter sounding and compressed sounding. And when you have a file that is got all of that on it, and then you want to go try and mix it and add stuff to it, there's artifacts and things that limit the mix guy, and that's when they wind up sound replacing. You know what I mean? Or I'll add this, I'll sound replace, I'll do this, I'll do that, and it's more work for the mix guys. And so what I try to tell people is like, you know what? First of all, if you're going to buy a drum set, before you buy a drum set, spend $200 on a good throne, because that's where you're spending all of your time. Sit in your butt on a throne and save your back and save your muscles and shoulder surgery, this back problem. Invest in a good throne. So the same thing, invest in a great computer and invest in good outboard gear before it hits the computer. If anything, for kick and snare, overheads, and find a way. Don't rob a bank or anything like that.
But there's plenty of places online now you can shop. You can get like 24 months interest-free payments and things like that. You know,
yeah.
One of my favorites is Sweetwater. I always use
Sweetwater is the best, man. Aaron Choloweski. But yeah, Sweetwater is great. Any of them are great. They're really, and there's so much out there that's affordable. You got to, and you got to educate yourself. You know, you really have to learn. Okay, so you learn what a Neve is. You'll learn what an API is. You learn what all the, you know, the 1176s, the Fairchilds, the Uris, the Pultecs. You learn what all the real gear is that even I can't afford these days. But you learn what everybody used, what the standard was. And then what you could do is then you see there's a lot of stuff being made that's to try and emulate that sound. Is it that sound 100%? No, but it's very close to it. And I feel like a box that's probably going to piss off a lot of engineers and stuff. But if you buy a box that's maybe something that's, you know, supposed to sound like an 1176, that is going to sound better, even if it doesn't technically sound better as a plugin of it. But when you're recording, if you're putting like that kind of compression on your guitar or your snare or your kick, before it hits the computer, it's gonna always sound better than the plugin.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's just gonna give your sound a big, fat, full sound. So for me, that's what I think has been the key to the success that I've have here. It's good playing, been around a long time, practicing, playing with a click, and, you know, just being musical. But the big part is the sound that people get and what they just throw in. But you just bring the faders up. If the sound going in is great, people are gonna want you to play on their stuff.
That's it. Well, man, I remember back in the day, again, sitting in your studio a few times and even tracking together, or I would come and do overdubs or whatever. Or a lot of times we would track together, but we were both we were both using Digital Performer at the time.
That's right.
And you were one of the guys that helped me learn DP. It was you. Right. And Todd Collins, the producer.
Yeah, Todd, sure.
David Browning, the producer.
David Browning had DP, yeah.
And Richie Pena. All of us, we were all using DP. And you guys were all teaching me how to use it. So I would just come over and just watch and be like, oh, what'd you do there? What's that? What's that?
That's what I would do with Browning.
Yeah. But now, I believe you're on Pro Tools as well. I'm on Pro Tools as my main. Yeah.
Right. Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. That's sort of my main thing. And it just, it got to the point that because, you know, I would send files, but then I would get guys who would just want to send me a Pro Tools session. Yeah. And, you know, you can't go DAW to DAW.
Right.
So it's like, you know, because sometimes they've recorded all this stuff. They didn't want to consolidate everything from bar 1 to bar 88. They didn't want to draw their crossfades. They didn't want to do all that work yet. So what I did was I still had DP, and I knew how to run it so well. I just didn't want to switch. Plus Pro Tools was $1 million back in those days. It was like, because you could afford it. So what I did do is they came out, remember they had the M box, that little blue box?
Yeah.
So I bought one of those used, and I just set that up with my laptop. So if a guy said, oh, can you do Pro Tools sessions? Yeah, I can. They would send me the session. I would download it. You know, it would take 2 hours back in the day, download their session. And then or they would send FedEx DVDs.
Wow, remember that?
Yeah.
Oh, bro, we're dating ourselves. They used to
I know.
FedEx and UPS DVDs with the session files on them. Oh.
That's right. Yeah. And your laptop actually had a drive on it.
A DVD drive, yes.
Drive. And so what I would do is I would open up the Pro Tools session, and I learned enough to know, you know, I'd open their session, copy it, and then I would do all the things I needed to do, and then I'd throw it into DP, do my session. Once I was done playing, I threw everything back into their Pro Tools session, and then sent it back to them. So it was a lot. It was a lot of extra process to go through, and it wasn't so bad in the beginning. But then when I was doing like 15 songs a week here, it was like I don't have that kind of time to be, you know, just. And then I had a couple interns and tried to do it, and they screwed things up. So I was like, okay, I got to think about Pro Tools. And what was it was providential at the time. This client, Joe Hand, a good buddy of mine, he's like, man, you know, I was just talking to a friend of mine in Chico, California, and he's a professor at a college there. And at that time, you could get like Logic Lite when you bought a Mac. That's when that happened. And so the school was getting all new computers. So the guy's like, I don't need my Pro Tools rig anymore. And it was like an educational, so it was cheap. If you bought it for education, it was cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
So he sold me his Pro Tools like 6 license. If it was Pro Tools 6, that's how long ago it was, and 1 interface. And so I got it. I was like, you know what? I could afford it. It was really cheap. I bought it. And then it might have even been Dave Browning who told me they were selling the Bennett House. Remember the Bennett House?
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, they were selling it, and they were clearing out the gear, and they had another. And the people that were doing it weren't even the music people. They were the people, they were like the landlord, the new landlord. So they didn't even know what they had. So I got a really cheap interface that I'm still using. I'm still using the 2 of those interfaces now. And so that's how I got into Pro Tools. And that really was a big, it wasn't that hard of a switch as far as having to run. I mean, there was some stuff in DP that Pro Tools didn't do, which was kind of a drag. But there were things in Pro Tools that Pro Tools did that DP did. So it was 6 of one, half a dozen, you know?
Yeah.
So, but it shaved a good, half hour, 40 minutes of time per song off of having to go back and forth.
That's right.
So I just got into Pro Tools at that time. And then and I just kind of stayed in it from there. So that's
I love that, man. I love that. All right. So we kind of blew over your past because I really wanted to highlight the fact that you've been a home studio pioneer from the early days. And clearly before you and I got into it in the early 2000s, there was plenty of people doing it in the 90s,
there were.
The turn of the decade there, once we hit the 1990 mark, that's when everything started really kind of ramping up. Like you mentioned, DA88s, ADATs, and all those things.
Yeah, man, that was all happening back then. A lot of stuff was home studios, and in New York there was home studios in New York with guys doing that stuff. And I never did it. When I worked at the Jingle Studio, I worked at a Jingle Studio in New York for, in between touring and stuff like that. And that's how I learned all my engineering skills and all the audio skills. So that was good stuff. And that's one thing I would tell anybody listening, that, if you're a player and you have an opportunity to go intern at a studio and you're like, no, man, I got to get paid. No, you don't. Just go there and learn. Just go there and watch and just learn the process. And that's what I did. And then one day the engineer didn't show up, and you're the engineer, Tone. So that's how I started.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask you. Take us from New York, your transition from New York to Nashville, and what prompted that? Yeah.
Okay. So in New York, like I said, I got very involved on the studio side, in the jingles side of it in New York. That's sort of how that came about. And part of it was, I was playing at CBGB's, Bitter End, every club, China Club. I was playing the whole New York club circuit, doing that whole thing. Man, it was like back in those days, it was Sean Pelton, Near Z, me, a bunch of Anton Fig was out doing gigs. It was the New York scene. You were doing your thing, But during the day, there was, not a ton going on. But one of the things that helped me get into session world was that when drum machines came out, see, this is before everybody was born, like when MIDI wasn't even invented. I thought, I remember I worked in a drum shop, and it was a real jazz drum shop, man. It was all about, it was not about pop music, rock, or it was all about jazz, which was great. I met every great jazz drummer on the planet, and that was like my college. That's where I learned a lot of stuff. But I remember one day, the guy who played drums on New York, I can't remember his name because I'm an old man, but anyway, Jimmy, what the heck? My email just opened out of nowhere. Jimmy something, can't remember his last name. Anyway, so he comes in with this box and these cables. And he said, hey, do you guys have anything I can plug this into? We had a little PV amp, because sometimes we worked on marimba, and vibes. So he had a little crappy PV amp. Actually, it was a good amp. So he plugs in this Linn drum, and he hits the pad that's the bass drum and kick drum. And I saw like like that's the sound I've been looking for my whole life, you know. And all the other cats were like, man, that sounds like a cardboard box, man. That's crap. The machine sucked. But I thought it was the coolest thing. So it took a while, but I convinced my father to loan me money. And by the time I got the money enough, I bought a SP12, an emulator SP12. And I dove right into all the electronics. So I did that. And when I brought it on a session where I was playing drums and doing the drum machine, I used to hang out. That's the other thing. I used to hang out at sessions. Once I was done playing and I was a kid, I didn't leave. I didn't have anywhere to go. I would just ask if I could stay and watch, you know, and then the horn players would come and the singers would come. And, you know, you'd kind of network with those folks and get to be friends with them. So that was part of my thing. So this one woman said, man, what's that sound? I said, oh, I played along with the drum machine. So her name was Ann Ruckert. She sang on a million jingles. So I got really good friends with her. And then she said, wow, my friend Suzanne Ciani, who was a big jingle writer, composer, has a studio and she's looking for someone to help her with stuff. Would you want to go do it? It's sort of an internship thing, but she's got every piece of gear on the planet. And, you know, so I said, yeah, I'll go down. I'll go see what it's about. And it was great because she was actually kind of getting out of the jingle thing, doing a new age music thing, and had this studio with like synclavier, which was like the early big. They had a Neve board. I mean, all this great gear. And the beautiful part was it was on 23rd and 5th, and it was in an office/apartment building. So where the studio was a converted apartment. So there was a shower, kitchen, cable TV, and a recording studio.
Done.
So I had an apartment, man. And there was this little kind of scraggly looking little sort of, you know, light-skinned black chick in the back making a record. And, you know, it was like, oh man, who is that? Who's that singing? It was Mariah Carey. She was working with Ben, again, not Ben Phillips, I can't remember his name, Ben something. They were working on her first record. In his, he had one of the rooms in the back that he was writing with. So I just immersed myself in that whole world there. So that led to engineering, then programming drums, then playing drums.
So you're working in this space, in a shared space where Mariah Carey is being groomed to be the pop star that she became.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It was crazy, man.
And just by happenstance.
Yeah. And she did not look like the way she looks at any period after she was, it was like, okay. But I only met her once, but, you know, because they only worked at night because Ben had other stuff to do. He had this money stuff to do. So they're working on this girl at night, you know, they had extra time, which also I had. When the studio was done for the day, making the money that it made, the studio was mine. So every band, they didn't have a drum room, but I fashioned one in the kitchen to put live drums in. Yeah. So I would just start bringing my bands in, wedding bands and everything like that. And that actually led to me getting the gig with Sweet Sensation, which was a 3-girl Latin group, pop Latin group in the late 80s, doing that freestyle kind of R&B thing. And I toured with them for years. So anyway, that's how that started. And then once I started touring out of, you know, once I toured and I would come back, I would still go to the studio and do stuff. And then that studio closed down. And then the young writers that I met there, they went to different studios. So then I just would work with them at different studios in two capacities, playing drums and programming drums. Because back in those days, drummers programmed the drums. The keyboard players didn't. And there were no loops. You had to actually program it.
Which I always tell drummers you should master drum programming because it makes sense. Yeah.
Beats, the way they call it beats now. You know,
beats, make your beats.
So, yeah, and I loved it. I really enjoyed it. So that kind of got me so sort of entrenched in that world. But what else happened is the Mac started to be able to record audio at that time. That's when Studio Vision came out, which was the precursor to Performer, because and Digital Performer. So it was all MIDI and digital in Performer, but then it was getting to the point where you could do a little audio into these computers. So since I had been doing that with the Synclav and all these other folks, and in those days you didn't want to hire an engineer to come in and press 3 on the keyboard, they would say, Tone, you want to come in and engineer for me, and then do drums and then stay and just record. Of course they paid me. So I would be part of the whole process of stuff being recorded. So that was one of the things that, when I first came to Nashville in 1997, this one guy who had been here, who went to New York to work, he said to me, if you're going to Nashville to be a drummer, you got to be a drummer. Because as you know, and I know, whatever Nashville sees you at the first time, that's what you are. If you wear red boots, you're the red boots guy.
It's true, man.
So when I came to town, I never told anybody that I did all this audio production and stuff. I was a drummer. I didn't tell anybody I built drums for world-class drummers at a drum shop. I was a drummer. So I never got into that. So when I did start doing the stuff here and I knew what to do, people were like, what do you know? You're just a dumb drummer. And I'm like, yeah, I got a little bit of history you don't know about. So all of that to say that stuff just fed into and also kept me working, because when there were times like when you would be on a tour, and if you got to realize, again, I hate to allude to this, but it was the dinosaur age. There was no cell phones. We didn't have cell phones. You'd have to go, and you didn't call from a hotel because that would cost you $500.
Yeah.
So what you would do is you'd wait till you get to the venue, or you'd get, you'd save your quarters and you'd find a phone booth, and your tour was going to wind down. You started calling people, hey, I'm going to be home. I'm going to, I need work.
Well, how about the calling cards? You buy them at the gas station?
That's exactly right. You bought a $50 calling card at the gas station. Use that. So yeah, all of that stuff to be able to network, because you didn't have the internet or anything. So the thing for me is some guys would get off tour and it would take them a minute, and they would be doing other kind of gigs like phone sales or, waitressing or waitering and all that stuff, which there's nothing wrong with any kind of hard work.
Yeah.
But because I went that route of learning the glass side of the studio, I got off tour. I would go right wherever. My buddy Michael Whalen was a composer at a bunch of places. This girl, Tamara Klein, she's out in LA. They would be like, okay, good, you're getting back. Okay, so when are you getting home? I'll get home Sunday. Okay, cool, be here Monday at 12. I would have something to go to and work at. Maybe not playing, or programming, but I was still recording. I was still working. And through that, I met so many great players and, guitar players and bass players, because in that time, there would be, they'd have some loop stuff was starting to come out on CDs. So, but, I'd be hanging out with guitar players and drummers or bass players or whatever, as they're doing stuff. And what do you do? I'm a drummer. Well, give me, what do you, and I'd give them my tape, or they'd hear me play, and that led to work, So that's sort of how it's so funny, because the technology side of it is what kept me working in the business and got me more work. And I have clients today of guys who, they're doing all film and TV at this point, but they were players then, and we just stayed with it for years,
Right.
So
that's a beautiful thing. So you decided to come to Nashville to pursue being a session drummer.
Okay, yeah. What happened is in New York, I was touring. I lived in LA for 2 years.
Oh, you did?
With Stevie B, the R&B artist back in the day. And that was like late 80s, early 90s. So I was in LA, I think from 90 to 91 for 2 years. It was great. I was working with Diane Warren and, some.
I was going to say, that's how you worked with Diane Warren.
Diane Warren and all those peeps.
Was that also Phil Ramone?
The Phil Ramone thing was at the Suzanne Ciani place.
Oh, up in New York. Yeah.
Up in New York. Yeah. He was working with an artist from Motown, and they, I wound up programming a lot of drums on that stuff. Phil Ramone was great. He was really cool. That was fun. So that's when I did the Phil Ramone stuff, but the Diane stuff was in LA.
Okay.
We got to actually be good friends. So my whole situation in LA kind of changed because the artist had a lot of issues and it affected the band. And so I wound up just going back to New York to regroup, and it was, owed money involved, which did get resolved, but a little bit of the prodigal son story. And then, so when I went back to New York at that time, I got back into the jingle world and all that stuff. And then I was also exploring the spiritual side of my life and the faith side of my life. I was getting that together. And then actually my plan was to hang out in New York till this money thing got cleared. And then when I got my money all cleared up from the Stevie fiasco, I'd go back to LA and just, they were trying to, actually Diane was trying to get me the gig with Cher at the time, which was because her boyfriend at the time was this guy, Guy Roche. He was producing Cher. So that was sort of in the works. And then Cher started dating the drummer that's in that video, the I Could Turn Back Time video. She started dating the drummer, so I was out. So anyhow, God had another plan for me. So I wound up meeting my wife, re-meeting her. And I wound up staying in New York, and actually our second date that we went on, my wife and I, was a Catholic charismatic prayer group, which is a bunch of Catholics who want to be Protestant, but they still want to hold on to the Catholic tradition. So it was a very cool thing. And so they didn't have a drummer at their little Wednesday worship thing. So I came in and I started playing drums there. And it was just the weirdest thing. So, and the musicians were mediocre at best, but my gosh, the heart and the spirit that they played with was killer. It was great worship, you know? Yeah. So that would be the least place that I would have ever expected that I would have gotten a gig from at all, because it was not like that at all. But it did turn out that one of the brothers of the family, big Irish family, who ran the whole thing, he was Kathy Troccoli's business manager. Kathy Troccoli was a, she was a Christian artist for years. Came out of the Amy Grant camp and all that stuff. She was from New York, was in Nashville doing the Christian thing, but she had a huge hit with a song called Everything Changes in 1993 that Diane Warren wrote. So there was like this full circle thing. So Kathy started touring in the pop secular world as an opening artist. And she had this band from Long Island, and that didn't work out too good. And so she wound up hiring a band from Pittsburgh that she came across. It was a set band, the B.E. Taylor Group, and they were her band. And so she was out touring with them. Wow. And great musicians in the band. But at that time, people were starting to play live with tracks. Like you said, it was either a DA-88 or a CD player or a DAT player. You know, DAT would be a little.
I remember that digital audio tape.
Yeah. So click on the left, music on the right.
Hold on, we got to park there for a minute. I want everybody to understand who wasn't there at these times.
Okay.
When Tony says that, you on a tape or a CD, you only have two tracks. It's a stereo track, left and right. So you would have to pan the click over to the left, and then put all of the music over to the right. Now, which means it's super mono, and it sounds really horrible.
And it wasn't meant to be mono,
right?
You know. So, but that's how they did tracks back then. So the thing is that both machines had a very high rate of, especially CDs, because they could jitter and bounce.
They would jump. Skip. Yes.
So,
man.
So for whatever reason, the guy in the band in Pittsburgh was having a tough time with that and hanging on to, which, to his defense, the count-offs and the clicks were terrible.
Yeah.
Kathy's stuff. They weren't clear and concise about how many, like one song could have 6 clicks, one song could have 2, one song could have 9.
You gotta have your slates tight.
You gotta have the slate. Well, that's when I invented that.
See?
So what happened was, I get my friend Steven's like, hey, you know, Kathy, she's doing this big event. It's the Pope is saying Mass in Camden Yards in Baltimore. Wow. And the night before, they're doing a huge concert. You know, it's going to be this Michael W. Smith, Boys to Men were actually on the bill. They did the whole gospel thing. It was great. And Kathy was playing. So he said, but they need a drummer for that gig. Can you do it? It was only 3 or 4 songs we did. I said, sure. So, and now at that time, I'm at this place called Not Just Jingles. It's a jingle house, and I'm the studio manager there, but I'm assistant engineering, playing drums, running the studio. I was, cooking the breakfast for guys. We had a lot of connections cooking. So,
there you go, see?
Yeah.
That's the Italian in you.
That's the Italian, man. It's about the food. And it was New York, a lot of Italian musicians out there too. Yeah. So anyhow, so what happens is Steven brings me the CD that they play to, and I'm like, oh my God, this is horrible. How does this guy know when to come in? So because I was at the studio, and now, well, again, it wasn't digital. We had a 2-inch, 24-track machine, Neve board, and a 1/4-inch tape. And what I did is I back create, like if something had 9 clicks, I'd go and I'd cut it off. I'd make it 8. If something had 3 clicks, I would make it 8. I would have to, you know, back it up and slate it, record it, slate it, record it, or have to edit the tape to be 8 clicks. And then what I would do is I would go on the click track that was on the left. I would count. I would say the name of the song, Go Light Your World. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And so that way I knew what song it was. And I always knew if for whatever reason the CD player jumped or the DAT player jumped, I would know where I was to start the song. Okay. And that saved my butt. And, you know, that's how I wound up doing. That's what it sort of became. So that's why I say invented it. I'm sure other people did too. But I was not going to go in to do this gig, this one-off gig. That's right. Without a rehearsal, because there was a bad rainstorm and the guys couldn't get in.
But as they say, invention is the mother of all necessity, right?
It's necessity is the invention. Yeah. So I went out. We had our DAT player. The dumb ass Steven forgets the DAT player in New York, so we had to go buy a CD player. And I'm like freaking out, like, oh, you know, he's like, should I run it at the house? I'm like, no, because if something goes wrong, I need to turn it off. So we went to, I forget what store we went to in Baltimore. We had the CDs with us. So we bought a CD player, a really good one, that had a lot of sampling, and we bought 2 pillows.
I was just going to say, you put it on pillows. Yes. Put it
on pillows. Yes. On a case. And it worked. And the shows went great. Yeah. The band sounded great. And that was it. A week later, when we went home, Kathy and I flew home together. And she had points for first class. She didn't want to sit alone, so she bumped me up to first class. And she proceeded to tweeze my eyebrows on the way home.
What?
From the gig, yeah. So, see, that's what really gets you gigs, folks. It doesn't have anything to do with your playing, man. If you're decent, as long as you let the singer tweeze your eyebrows and you're inventive, you get the gig and could cook. So what happened is, long story longer, she calls me 4 days later. Hey, you want to be my drummer? We're doing all these, you know, one-off gigs and stuff. And so I joined her band. So I did her band for 3 years out of New York. Yeah. And we would always do her pop gigs, which were great. We opened Bryan Adams. We opened for Michael Bolton. She did it all. She used to be part of the Amway circuit. So she used to do concerts like for Amway conventions that were in, you know, Mexico or in, you know, wherever. And they'd be like, hey, you know what? We don't want to pay you guys to rehearse in Pittsburgh or New York. Why don't you come down a week early and, you know, rehearse in Cabo for a week? Okay. That was a big circuit back then in the 80s. Right. Yeah. Those corporate gigs, as they call them. So I did a lot of those with her. So, and then that led to doing a lot of work with the guys in Pittsburgh. I started playing on stuff for the stuff they were producing. And then what happened with Kathy is that we would always kind of like, you know, get up pissed and be like, man, why don't we do it? Because, you know, Christian music touring season is spring and fall. So it'd be like we would do all her summer dates and we would do dates here and there in the spring and in the winter, but spring and fall she'd be doing these Christian tours, and we weren't playing with her because they would hire the headliner band and Kathy would sing with them.
Oh, and they would be the house band for all.
They would be the house band. Yeah. So we were sort of like,
I've been down that road before. That's
right. Yeah, you've done it. You've been there. So it was sort of like, I was like, that pissed me off a little bit. So I was like, you know,
well, hold on. I gotta interject here. It's so funny because like the same thing happened to me, and I remember it well. Is when I was with Yolanda Adams.
Oh yeah.
And Kirk Franklin's band. They chose their band to be the house band. Yeah. And I got so pissed off that I just started cursing, and, you know, and here I am in the gospel music section, and they're like, yo, man, you can't talk like that here, man. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
I'm not going to kiss you while you're screwing me, man. You know, but exactly.
So we can identify as hot-blooded Italians from New York.
Right. So it was sort of a drag. So there was one tour in '96 that she was doing where she said, I want my drummer. She goes, I want my drummer on the tour.
Yeah, good for her.
So they wanted, I was going to play drums for all the bands. It was three artists on that tour. So the opening act, Kathy, and then I forget who the headliner was. And they were like, okay, you can bring your drummer. But he's got to set up the lights and tear down the lights before and after the gig. And they wanted to pay me $125 a night. I was like, I'm making $300 a night playing weddings in New York. I'm not going to go. Are you kidding me?
What are they on drugs? What the hell?
Like, yeah, I was like, if they were Christians, they must be smoking crack or something. I was like, yeah, I respectfully declined.
Yes.
So of course, Kathy wasn't too happy. And actually, the guitar player, my buddy Rick, he was going to come out. They were going to have the drummer and guitar player from Kathy's band and 3 other guys from the other band. And he too was like, hey, I'm not, that's ridiculous. I'm not breaking down the PA, doing that. And I'm like, see ya, I'm out. So what started happening though is from 93, I started with the 94, 95, and 96 as well. But 96, I was a little more established. So 94, 95, I came down to Nashville with her during GMA, which I don't know if you remember, was Gospel Music Association Week. And they'd have awards, and they'd have all the Christian artists would perform for promoters and record labels and all that stuff. And I was lucky enough to be with a bunch of guys where I worked all the time during that week later. But so when I first came down, I was like just coming with Kathy just to play djembe because she had a piano player that would play piano, our friend Nat from the band, and I played djembe or congas or brushes, and she would just do her thing. So I just started meeting all these musicians like Dave Cleveland, Dave Browning. I just started meeting all the guys that Michael and I played with a lot. Yeah. And so they were like, dude, you should come to town, man. Oh my gosh, no one plays like you, blah, 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 blah. And then so Kathy was sort of like, you should think about it. And what was happening in New York was it was going to a lot of the drum stuff was now coming out on CDs and DVDs, and people were using that. That was becoming more urban. New York was definitely getting away from, there wasn't too much rock stuff. It was the Lisa Loeb singer-songwriter stuff. So what started to happen is some people were interested in me playing on stuff in Nashville. They wanted that New York thing. So I would come down and I would play. And it got to a point where I was doing like more recording here than I was up in New York, live recording, playing drums and stuff. Right. So, so little by little, I just started inquiring about coming. And then, I had to convince my wife that we were moving. She never wanted to move. We had just bought a house in 95. So it was this really strange thing. And it was definitely a God thing. There really was. I mean, I still had strong faith, and I still do to this day. And I do believe that it was like, and it turned out to be like the best move I made. So we made the move in 97. And it was unique for me because I already had a gig with Kathy, who was an established name artist in Tennessee, in Nashville, right? Mm-hmm. So, and she was known as being sort of a hard butt on her musicians. So if you were around a long time in her band, they figured, man, you must be good. You must have a good resolve if you can hang, Yeah. And so when I got to town, I didn't have a gig. I moved in April of 97. But that September, she was going out on her first headlining Christian tour, and I was going to be the music director. So I had a gig when I got to town.
That's nice, yeah.
And then what happened is the guy Bill, who was the band leader from Pittsburgh, he had wanted to open for her and then be the band like we had done before. But in Christian world, the opening acts pay to be on the tour. So they have to pay in to be on the tour. Wow. So Bill wasn't going to be paying in anything. And plus he was starting to do these Christmas concerts. So it wasn't going to work for him. So he and a couple of the other guys bailed on it. And it was me and the guitar player were going on the tour. But now I had to find a bass player and a keyboard player. So I was in a very unique situation of being the new guy in town and making phone calls to musicians and, hey, I'm Tony Morra. I just moved to, oh, yeah, I got a drummer. I don't need a drummer. I'm like, no. I need to hire you. I'm looking to hire a keyboard player. Are you available to go on the road? So it was a very cool situation to be the new guy hiring people. Yeah. So that's sort of how I sort of got kind of into it quicker than most, and that's providential. That wasn't me. That was God stuff. So anyhow,
but that's awesome. But that also leads to something else that I really subscribes to is you have to take initiative.
You do.
You can't just sit around and wait. And back in the day, we used to say you can't sit around and wait for the phone to ring. But now it's, you know, you can't sit around and wait for the DMs to blow up.
That's right.
It doesn't matter whether it's the DMs or the texts or the phones or the emails. You can't sit around and wait. You just have to take initiative.
Right. The thing I've learned in life is the biggest fallacy, the biggest bullshit. I don't know if I could say that, but
of course you can say that.
Is we'll find you. They'll find you. No. Because you know what? No one's looking for you.
No one's looking. There's too many other fish in the sea. Who's looking?
Well, one person said to me once, and it was a good thing it was a woman. If it was a guy, I would have slapped him in the face. Because she said, "How come I never heard of you?" And I was like, "This was in Nashville," and I'm like, "I don't know. Maybe you're just not listening close enough." You know, and that did not endear me to the person, and I did not ever work with her. But the reality of the situation is, most people, they have their guys, they have their people, they don't have to look. You have to put yourself out there respectfully. You know, you're not walking in on any of like John Robinson or Jeff Porcaro when he was, you're not walking in on their sessions and saying, "Hey, hire me." But you got to make phone calls. You got to be out there. You got to be doing your thing.
That's right.
And you got to be confident. You know, there are many people in Nashville who probably didn't get Michael and I because they might think we were a little too cocky, but you know, we believed in what we did, and we've been doing it a long time, man. And it's like, look, I look at it this way. If I was going to hire a lawyer because I was being unjustly considered for a crime that I did not commit, and I go to find a lawyer and I say, "Man, look, Johnny lawyer, you any good?" "Well, I'm okay." For that, I'm not hiring Johnny lawyer. I'm finding the guy that says, "Listen, you are never going to jail. Here's what I've done. Here's what I do." You know, so if someone asks you, now the thing is, you better be able to back up.
You have to, you
gotta walk the walk. You know, you got to walk the walk of the talk. But the thing is that no one's going to find you if you don't put yourself out there. That's there are those moments where things do happen and things line up, and wow, I was looking at YouTube, I saw you, wow, I want you, you're going to get a gig. That's great. You know, but really, you got to put yourself out there and and you got to be prepared to you got to do it. You got to, you can't just, it's funny because there's a saying, I don't know if they're saying out in LA, but they're like, if it's not on Facebook, did the session really happen? Like if you didn't post it on Facebook, did it really happen? Like I have a hard time doing all that stuff. I really do. It's not a false humility thing. It's like, it's like my son who's an athlete. When he catches the football, if you catch it in the end zone, don't dance like an idiot. Do that in the end. Act like you've been there. Act like you belong. Act like you've been there before. So that's what it feels like. If I posted it every session I was doing,
I know.
Boring to me because not much going on.
Because it's our job. It's what we do.
It's our job. It's what you do. But
you still have to do it.
Still have to do it.
You have to let people know what you're doing, and then people do. Sometimes it does, and nowadays it's Instagram and TikTok, and as things are moving forward, it's going more towards TikTok, but it doesn't matter the platform. The point is this, methods change, but principles remain the same, man.
Absolutely.
It's the same old shit day in, day out, year in, year out, decade, and so forth. So with that being said, this is the perfect segue, actually. I want to ask you about it because we've seen that you've done quite a bit of beta testing for a lot of these online apps that make it easier to do sessions in real time via remote sessions in real time.
In real time, right.
Man, and that's the forefront. So talk about that a little bit. Talk about,
Okay, so when I started the room and when I got the props in Mix Magazine, there's an engineer, I don't know if she's still doing it. Her name was Gina Font-Sands, and oh my gosh, I forget her partner's name. And they were starting this thing called eSession. And what it was is you sign up for it, and it was like a directory of players. You just sign on. You didn't have to pay to get in. You had to be invited to be on. You had to be a professional. You had to be vetted. And then what they would do is you would have this session that would pop up in Pro Tools or Performer, and it was really cool, but it didn't last and it didn't work. So because what they were trying to do was like, Michael, if you had tracks you would play the tracks from your thing. I would hear it through my thing, and then I would be playing recording on my DAW, but you would also hear it simultaneously on your DAW, just a stereo mix. And it was okay for a minute, but that sort of thing, it's really, for some reason, I think with the change of technology and bandwidth and all that stuff, it was hard and expensive to keep up with it. I think things will get close to that being able to really happen just as a normal everyday happenstance. Okay, so after that kind of fell by the wayside and didn't work, I found a thing, because that's when podcasting started getting pretty popular, when people were doing their own podcasts. Wow. So there was a thing called Nicecast. And what that was is you just would have to feed your audio into this app, and then the audio would be broadcast wherever anybody linked in, and it would go to the server. And then what I would do, Michael would send me his files. Mm-hmm. I would lay them all out, chart out the tune, and then what I would do is I would just have a talk back next to my drums, so Michael would be able to hear me through that. And then sometimes I would put a phone, or you would just text message back and forth. But as I would play, I would send a link to Michael, right. And then Michael would click on the link, and he would hear it on his studio system or in his headphones, just like he was in the next room. Right. And then what I would do is I would do a pass, I'd run it down, and then after I would do the track, that Michael or whoever I was working with would say, in the bridge, instead of like going to open hats, go to a bell on a ride cymbal, okay? I would either punch that in or I would do another take. And I did that for a long time, but then Nicecast went away for whatever reason. The technology that it was got old. And so now there's a new thing called, let me look at it because I have to remember what it's called. It's called Audio Hijack. Uh-huh. Okay, so that's pretty much the same thing as what the Nicecast thing was, but Nicecast was great because it was one app. You just set your inputs how you wanted them, and it was good. This thing has the same thing, but you have to now rent a space. Like I don't know if you have to, like if you have I have Soundcheap or whatever it's called. I have a server that I rent monthly.
Oh, okay. No, I don't even do that. Yeah. Okay.
So you with this thing, that's what you have to do. You rent the server, you put in your server's number into this Audio Hijack, and then I send a link, and same thing, you just click on it, and then you hear the session going on in real time. Now with digital phones and everything, like unfortunately I have the new iPhone 12s. Yeah. The phone doesn't come out of the headphone jack anymore, the little lightning port. Right. So if you had a lightning port to left and right, 1/4 inch or whatever, you could just plug your phone into a channel and just have the phone on, and that's your talk back, that's your communication. But you can't do that now with the phone.
I didn't know that. Wow, that's cool. But now you can't. Okay.
Yes. So all right. So now, ironically, today I did a session with a guy who's in Virginia, through that Sound Better thing we were talking about. Yeah. Sound Better is a website that they go hire musicians on to play on people's stuff.
Oh, right. That's right. Yeah.
So this guy I played on his song, but he's going to do a live video broadcast of the Tower Powers keyboard player. I forget who the bass player plays with, but all these cats, so we're going to play live with video and audio simultaneously while we're all in different places. Now that's been done before, but it has taken a lot of bandwidth and technology to get it to work. Mm-hmm. But now there's this app called Jamulus. Oh,
I'm checking that out. Okay.
And so now what they did with that, how we did it today was I downloaded the app. The guy told me that you have your own server, then they have a server. So they had a server that I clicked on. Right. So I'm in the server room, and the piano player, who's the artist, he clicked on, he was in the room, and the engineer was in the room. And what the engineer did is he played a track for me to play to, and I played to it. Now, there was a little bit of latency. There's a little tiny bit of latency, which, you know,
okay.
Latency is, if you don't know what that is, like when you play, if you hit the snare drum, like pop, pop, it happens a little bit after. It's a little delay.
Right.
But it wasn't that bad, actually. So I was able to play with that. And then the piano player got on, and I was playing with the piano player who's in Virginia, and I'm here, we're playing live. And so that Jamulus thing could be very cool. Not that whole thing is good for live stuff. It's not good for recording. But what it is good for is that when you log into it, all your audio is in one place. So the session, all the drums you're hearing is from the Pro Tools session. My talkback is from the Pro Tools session. And then the audio coming out of Jamulus, I just routed it into Pro Tools so I could hear him talk. So when we are talking, it's in real time. There's no lag, there's no delay. So that's cool because, you know, I could literally just, if I had to play a track for him, I could play the track, record it, you know, and record it in my DAW. But if he wanted to stop me in mid-tune, he could just come in and say, Tone, stop, I want you to do something different here. So it was really real-time, proactive way to work. So that was pretty, and I just did that this morning. So that's that. And I've been looking for something where I could have the talk back, where we could have the communication and the music through the same app at the same time.
Right. And okay. So I love the fact that you brought all that up. And I'm so sorry because I'm sitting here scrounging my files looking for it. There's an app that I used with a composer named Tim Davies. He just composed a whole on Netflix, and I played all the guitars on it. It's coming out soon. It's called Maya and the Three.
Nice.
And that's how we did a lot of the sessions. And I can't think of the app that he used, and I installed it into Pro Tools. I actually bought the annual membership. Everybody out here is using it. Do you know what I'm talking about?
There's two that I could think of. One is Source Connect.
No.
And then there's another one called Audio
Movers.
Audio Movers.
That's the one. Okay. All right.
Audio Movers is great. That's awesome too.
So Audio Movers, Source Connect, Jamulus.
Mm-hmm. Now Jamulus again the app is more for guys wanting to jam together and practice.
Oh, okay.
But you could use it in the situation. Now the thing is, with again, like the one thing about like what I do with Audio Hijack, the person doesn't need to have any kind of app or anything. They just click on the link and they're hearing me. You know what I mean?
Audio Hijack, so that company provides the link for you?
No. Audio Hijack is what that is. I kind of have to, it's a little convoluted. I got
it. That's the one by Rogue Amoeba.
That's it. That's exactly it. It's going I go out of Pro Tools and I bus it, and I got it, you know, I have my patch bay. I bus it out of two outputs and I send it into my computer to the input of the computer, and that's what goes out. So so all you do is the person doesn't need to have anything on the other end to buy. So that's the good part about that. But the hard part is the communication, because you have to communicate on another source, and it could be Zoom, it could be Skype, and there's a delay between the music and when you're talking and all that stuff, and it gets a little confusing. So, but with this Jamulus thing, now the other person has to have it, but you can have it, you don't have to buy it. It's free. You know what I'm saying? Yes. So they can have it, and you just tell them, okay, you know, log in, put your information in, and you go to, you know, your settings control, and you'll see downtown battery server, and you go onto the server, and you're able to, whatever you're talking into in your system, could be your iMac or your computer microphone or your laptop microphone. I'm going to hear you through Jamulus.
Yeah.
So we could talk like you and I are talking right now. But when we start playing music, you're going to hear the music. It's going to be in real time. There's going to be a little bit of a delay, but when we talk, there's no delay, and everything is all included in that. So it's really coming a long way. And audio movers is great too.
Yeah.
The thing is with all these things is you have to be creative sometimes in how you're busing and sending your audio to where it's going. You got to have a little, you got to just read. Like with the Nicecast, it was pretty easy. I figured out how to get my audio to the app, and it worked. When I got the Rogue Amoeba thing, the audio hijack thing, that was a little more convoluted.
Okay.
I had to read a couple things, but it once I got it, it was like, oh, it's this, this, and this. And
Yeah.
You know, so you got to, that's the thing with anything now. It's all tied to the technology. It's, you know, you got to practice your paradiddles if you're a drummer. You got to practice your scales if you're a guitar player. You still got to play great.
Yeah.
You know, no matter how good the technology is, if you want to continue, you can be good these days and play. Yeah. And I tell this to young guys, you can be good and play and get by. In our day, we couldn't just be good enough to do the things we're doing. You had to be able to play. Yeah. You know, you had to know how to punch in. You had to know how to do all this stuff. So, you know, because you couldn't peel back on tape, you know, and so when you punched in, you had to match exactly. So, but now you can be good enough to do it. But the problem is if you're good enough, you're not going to last long enough. You're going to hit a wall, and you're going to be doing it for a couple of years, and you're going to be gone. And the guys that are going to last are the guys that grow with it and learn and get better and better and better and better. That happens. That's what creates longevity. Right.
To wrap up, I was just going to ask you if you had any words of wisdom, and then that puts it perfectly.
You know, it's just, you still got to be great at what you do and aspire to be great at what you do if you want to continue in it.
Yeah.
It's sad to say, and I hate saying, yeah, you could be good enough, because I also, sometimes guys will call me and say, hey, could you beat detective these drums for me? I recorded a band. It's the kid playing, and I'm running out of time, and I know you're really quick with that. So I'll get it, and I'll beat detective it, and I'll edit it, and it'll sound great. But the performance wasn't great. But the kid's good enough that I could get close enough and I could fix it. And he's good enough. He'll be in that band. He'll do stuff for other people. They'll beat detective. It'll be good enough. But at some point in time, you're going to have to go out. You know, I had a kid. I know you want to wrap up, but you know, he was in my intern, and then he was like, all right, he was here for a bunch of years. He's like, I'm going to venture out on my own. I'm like, go ahead, go do your thing. And he said to me when he left, am I a studio musician now? And I'm like, well, how many sessions have you done? You've been on a lot of sessions with me as an intern and as an assistant. How many have you done? He's like, I don't know, 4. I said, well, I don't know. I would say no. And he got a little dejected. Yeah. And so he left a little like, you know, man, I put all this time in, and you're my mentor. And I was just being honest with him. And then like 2 weeks later, he got called to do a date for someone who worked here, but they didn't have a big budget, and they called this guy, Chris, to come play drums. And so he asked if they would send him the music ahead of time, because he couldn't sight read and he couldn't just play it down the first time. So, but he got by on a couple of those songs. But then on one of the tunes, they totally changed everything. Oh, could you play blast sticks on it? Oh, could you play brushes on it? Oh, and the bridge, instead of playing 4 on the floor, could you do this rhythm? And he called me in a panic, and he goes, almost crying. He's like, I'm not a session musician, because I did 2 songs, and the third song, it took me like almost a whole session to do 1 song. And when people are paying a studio by an hourly rate, they don't have time for you to learn the song in 3 hours. Right. And he was so dejected. And it's like, well, you got to know what, you know, that's why something, you know, you put the cart before the horse sometimes, and you go, yeah, I'm ready. And you go in, and it's a lot of times in the music business, you get 1 shot, you know, and if you're not good, you're not getting called back, you know. So that's why I say there's things you could do as a young musician and recording at home, and you could be really good with your ears and really good with your best friend's ears or your girlfriend's ears or your parents' ears. But when you go and you work with a guy who's doing this, who's making money at it and is making a living at it, you're doing it with his ears, you know. So you got to know, you got to kind of know, and you got to put your time in. And if you do, and you get to that spot, you'll be successful, and you'll continue, you know. Not that you quit, you got to keep working on it. But
well said, man. I'm just sitting here reminiscing about all the sessions we've done in Nashville and all the producers we worked with, you know, from Brown Bannister, and, you know, the list goes on. Keith Thomas, and something else I wanted to talk about real quick was that, you know, all your credits from Phil Ramone and Diane Warren, you know, and Donna Summer, Roberta Flack, all the greats, right? To the modern artists, the CCM artists. So you got Selena Gomez, Taylor Swift, Carrie Underwood, you know, a lot of these that you and I have in common that we've worked together. You also have, you know, Bruce Springsteen. So just runs the gamut. You know, my point is, and I have a very similar resume. And we both kind of came up in this time. We were able to do that. Music is definitely shifting, and I don't want to sound like a bunch of two old guys ranting on the podcast. I want to sound, and I'm telling the listeners, you know, I want, you know, everybody to listen and just, hey, again, it might not be the same exact way, but the principle is the same.
Principle's the same.
So what Tony and I are saying is that that's what matters. Keep your eye on that. And Tony, I love asking everybody this question because it varies. It really does. How do you define success?
I define success by the fact that I can pay my mortgage, send my kids to school.
There you go.
Pay my bills. I'm not in big debt. I'm not rich. I don't have the nicest car, but I have a great loving wife, and I have two amazing kids that are doing amazing things. They're both a pain in the ass, but they're still amazing. And success for me is that I'm 57 and I still get to do what I do, and I love it.
God bless you, man. You're doing it strong. Yeah.
It's, you know, fame. I tell people when I'm going to produce them, the first question I ask is, do you want to be successful or famous? Because they're two very different things.
That's
you
right.
could be famous for a lot of things these days, and you could be famous quick. You want to be successful, success will equal longevity. To me, if you want to do something and you want to do it for a long time, then it's successful. Does it have to be at the top of because sometimes you could be that shooting star, man, but that shooting star burns out quick. You know what I mean? It's those artists that just keep going and going and going and going, man. You know, and that's what I think success is, you know.
I love that answer.
You know, if you could look at yourself at the end of the day in the mirror and go, you know what? I did good and I'm not a dick.
Amen to that. I love.
You know what I mean? It's like, okay,
that's exactly what you mean.
You know, people actually take my phone call and like me, so invite me to parties. I guess I'm successful. I don't know.
I love it. I love it, Tony. We used to say our Goomba brothers over here.
Oh, man, that's right, man. That's awesome.
All right, I got some fun rapid fire questions for you. You ready?
Okay, yeah.
All right, name 3 tour essentials. When you went on tour, what would you take? The 3 things you can't leave home without.
Can't leave. Okay, gear wise or
doesn't matter.
Okay, medicine. You know, make sure you have like headache medicine, poop medicine, any of that kind of medicine. It's important to have that on the road. Definitely these days have your cell phone with you, and as a drummer, a practice pad or practice sticks.
I like it. Favorite decade of music?
Oh, that's you know, that's the hardest. I guess I would say the 70s, because of the so much stuff came out of that, funk wise, rock wise, pop wise. But man, every decade's got its thing, man. You know, I'd say 70s because that's what I grew up in, you know.
I agree. All right. Favorite restaurant or favorite food? And I already think I know where this is going to fall, but just
I think you're probably not going to get Indian food is my favorite food.
Oh, see, I would have guessed Italian. All right, Indian. Okay.
Yeah, Indian is my favorite because I have Italian all the time. Like I'm gonna make Parmesan and pasta tonight is what I'm making. So,
all right. With that being said, though, favorite city. Come on.
New York City, man.
New York City. Me too. Me still. It's never gonna change.
It's never gonna change, man. I love Nashville. I love it.
I do too. But, yeah.
You know, if I want pizza at 3 in the morning, there's only one place to get it.
That's right, New York. I mean, and I love LA, but there's still something about New York City.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know if you drink a little bit or if you did in the past.
Yeah,
Drink it short. What do you like?
Elijah Craig bourbon. That's my drink.
Oh, a nice bourbon. I like that. Elijah Craig. All right. Your friends would say that you are
a teddy bear.
A teddy bear. I never thought of you that way, but I like that. I like that.
When you get to know me, it's like, oh, he's a big teddy bear. He's like a big brother.
No, you're a sweetheart. Absolutely. I would just think of you as
not good for my street cred, you know. But you know, I'm just trying to be honest with you, man.
No, I just think of you as my Goomba. You know, my Italian brother. You know.
Right. That's it. That's it. I'm everybody's big brother. Maybe that's a better answer.
I like that. I like that. Yeah. Song or band that changed your life?
Return to Forever. Romantic Warrior album. Changed my life.
Warrior. God rest your soul, chick. We love you.
Oh, man, that album changed my life.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Instrument you wish you played?
Guitar.
Okay. Yeah.
I'd still rather listen to guitar solo than a drum solo. Any day. Yeah. I wish I could play guitar.
All right. As entertainers, we're always playing and making music to entertain other people. But what entertains you?
What entertains me? My kids, man, just being involved, you know, not just watching them grow and do their thing. You know, my son's a football player. My daughter did color guard and stuff, and just watching them do their thing. Really, these days, that's it. That and History Channel.
I love it. Love it. All right. Hidden talents. You got any?
I can fix anything.
Oh, I like that.
Anything.
Bro, are you like a real handyman?
I could fix anything.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
See, I'm the opposite.
No, I could fix anything. Plumbing, I have the hardest time with, but I could do anything. Yeah. So
that's a good trait to have. Good.
My dad was like that. He taught me good, man. So believe me, saved me a lot of money over the years owning a house.
There you go. There you go. I like that. Yeah. All right. Now, you've had a lot of great collaborations. Do you have any dream collaborations that haven't happened yet?
Dream collaborations that haven't happened. I'd love to. I've played on stuff with Steve Lukather. I would love to be in a room working with him because I get his guitar playing. Like, I get it. Like, when I first got his solo album, I didn't even I put it on and just played to it. Yeah. Like, I knew what he was doing. Yeah. So that's somebody who I would really love to collaborate with. And, you know, Luke, just that guy.
I'll be doing a session this Thursday over at one of the studios that he's a part owner in. So yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I never met him myself, but my buddy Eric Valentine used to play drums.
Oh, Eric, yeah.
So I hear a
couple of his preamps, man.
Oh, there you go. Nice.
Yeah, his stuff's killer. Yeah,
I love it. Love it. All right. So finally, you ready?
Yeah.
The proverbial drum roll, please. Here we go. What would you do if you weren't a career musician?
I'd find some way to teach at a high school and be a football coach.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. I love sports. That's my thing.
That's a great answer.
Yeah. I did do it a little bit when my kid was young. I wouldn't want to coach my own kid again. Hardest thing to do. But I really enjoyed, you know, because I guess I'm a good motivator in a way. I don't know. So I that's what I would want to do, you know.
I love it.
Yeah.
Tony Morra, Anthony J. Morra. Everybody can find you online.
Yeah, I'm around.
Okay.
My website is Downtown Battery, BATTERIE.
That's right.
.com. But right now the server's down. But I'm on Facebook, Tony Morra. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. The Twitter.
So
you can find me. I'm not that small. I'm pretty big. You can find me. I mean, physically.
I'm giving you a big virtual bear hug right now.
Virtual hug, man. My Goomba.
Yeah. Oh, I missed the hell out of you, buddy. Thank you for being our guest here.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was awesome, man. It was awesome.